Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and the winner from the poll for today's video from the start of the week, after all the Brexit shenanigans midweek, is about Arron Banks, whom I described as the shadow behind Brexit. This is because he has been a major player within it, but not exactly front and centre. So who is he? He's a very wealthy insurance tycoon, effectively, who's been increasingly influential behind the scenes of British politics for the past few years, really. A very clever man, let's make no mistake about that. He's also very much self-made. Although his family were not exactly poor, you know, people may find, oh, he went to private school, he's not really come from a poor background. He didn't actually get the benefit from that private education because he kept getting expelled. So he really did build his fortune up from nothing due to shrewd business sense and instincts, really. So tales abound also of Arron Banks as a deeply vindictive man. When he feels he's been screwed over by others, he takes revenge. One fairly amusing but relatively low-level example came when Banks switched his support from the Conservatives to UKIP. He was about to donate £100,000 to them. This came up on a radio show where William Hague was asked about it, and he said he'd never heard of Arron Banks. Now, Nigel Farage later said that that was probably true because he wasn't a big party donor then. He sort of donated to the local Conservative Party. But Banks was so incensed by this that he upped the donation to UKIP to £1 million. Now he knows who I am, he said. There are more extreme stories, of his need to be respected as well. But it paints the picture of someone who doesn't take kindly to being slighted, takes it very personally. He's also known to be deeply dissatisfied with British politics, or at least so he says, and definitely wants to change it. Now, on that statement, many, of course, would be in agreement with him. But the problem is Donald Trump said exactly the same thing, didn't he? In order to attract blue-collar support. Banks is using exactly the same tactics. He targets those disenfranchised workers in the country, and it's believed that the campaigns he funded persuaded them to turn out in record numbers to the referendum. So he was definitely effective in what he did. And before I get onto the parts of his activities that I really object to, I will have to say, call it balance if you want, but it is relevant. And of course, this may not actually be the truth of the matter. He has often spoke about the unfairness of the gap between the haves and the have-nots. He once said of David Cameron that he was clever enough to get a first at Oxford, but too stupid to see the effects that his policies were having on people in the country. Of course, this may be to misunderstand David Cameron as somehow caring about it. It is possible to fully understand what your policies are doing and not actually care, but just feign caring. But it does give the impression that he has a conscience of sorts, and maybe what you'd conclude from that after we discover what he's been up to is that what he's done is the usual political trap of doing something wrong for what they see as the greater good. It's a powerful and dangerous mindset that's easy to fall into. How many of us in the past have maybe observed someone doing something that we know is wrong, but we sort of support them from something else they're trying to achieve, and it's easy in your mind to think, but is it in the greater good? Do the ends justify the means? After it's the only way they could do to get that objective. People do this all the time, making up excuses. But it's not necessarily as simple as that. There are those who know him who say that he simply has a chip on his shoulder concerning the wealthy elite. He couldn't go to university. Of course he couldn't. He kept getting expelled from his schools. His first father-in-law, a dentist, refused his daughter's hand in marriage to him because he had no prospects. At the time he didn't. William Hague's barbs apparently really stung as well, people have said. To some others, he's simply a man who, just like he was as a schoolchild, who kept getting expelled for reckless behaviour, is someone who takes pleasure in upsetting the apple cart. A revolutionary who just enjoys the rush of challenging the established order, not to put anything better in place, but just for the thrill. A little bit like in The Dark Knight, wasn't it? Some people just want to watch the world burn. And that's a view other people take of Arron Banks. Now, my personal view is I'm not really sure which of the last two it is, but I suspect it is one of the last two. I think it's largely a drive to succeed. I think he has been stung. He does have a chip on his shoulder. I don't think he has the have-nots in mind particularly. The thing is, he's using exactly the same tactics as Donald Trump. And Donald Trump cares no more about the blue-collar workers than I think Arron Banks does. And they are people that are associated with each other. They've had the same people, working with them on their campaigns. And I just think they're using exactly the same tactics. And I think that's what it's down to. But that's my personal opinion. But, he is also wanting to influence British politics even more. And who can blame him? He's been very good at it so far, extremely effective. But he hasn't been able to cover his tracks as well as he might have liked. Massive political donations were always going to be queried after all. And he has donated a huge amount to Brexit. Basically, he's not just satisfied with a hard Brexit. He's been recently lobbying EU member states to get at least one of them to block a request for their extension. So he definitely wants to make sure that's a done deal. He wants to continue wielding his influence in British politics afterwards as well, though. And as I say, as a result of his influence so far, he's removed David Cameron from frontline politics, a man he at least professed to hate. He's knackered Labour as a political force at the moment, and he's also got the Conservatives to shift further to the right. But last year, there were leaked documents that showed a Kremlin-backed gold deal with Arron Banks. It was an offer, not necessarily one he took part in, to get involved with this Russian gold deal, and it was made by the Russian ambassador in London. Now, the Russian state have long been suspected of interference, of course, in Western democracies, and in particular implicated in the US presidential campaign and the Brexit referendum as well in the UK. It's seen as an attempt to weaken Western societies in a strategy of divide and conquer. If true, then I'd say they've been very successful so far with both the US and the UK nations, hugely divided and incapable of concentrating on anything other than their own divisions. In the States, for example, you've got branches of government who seem to be spending all of their time either encouraging or discouraging a burger-munching man-child in the Oval Office. In the UK, almost all domestic policies have been completely suspended, while we surgically remove ourselves from the world. Arron Banks denied that any of his donations came from foreign sources, which would be illegal. But he donated about £8.5 million to various Leave organisations. The bulk of it, about £7.5 million, to leave.eu. Now, this, of course, has now come under scrutiny. And although Banks says that it is legitimate, the issue is that authorities have not been able to verify where it actually has come from. Because like with a lot of extremely wealthy individuals, much of his money is undisclosed thanks to the opaque systems that successive UK governments have allowed to exist and even flourish over the years. So the authorities in this country have no easy way of finding out the detail of a British citizen's income, even when they suspect unfriendly foreign influence in an electoral process. Now, what is known is that the money came from a shareholder loan to a firm of his from an unknown third party. So we know it wasn't Banks's own personal money. He was just a front. What we don't yet know is whose money it was. And just as with Trump, Banks constantly tried to deny links with the Russian government, but as well as the offer of a gold deal from the Russian ambassador, he has also had to admit to contact with a known Russian spy as well. Now, it seems that although Banks did not in the end invest in the gold scheme, there are questions about why it was offered. He did show a lot of interest, though, with emails linked to him saying he was passing it on to one of his business interests. This was not a normal business investment opportunity. This was a deal offered by the Russian government to reward people. It was guaranteed profits and reportedly huge profits at that. Some MPs wanted the matter investigated very seriously. Deals like this are not offered to people without reason. And the people involved with Banks were the same players, exactly the same people involved in meetings with Trump and his confidants during the presidential elections as well. Another serious link is Cambridge Analytica, the company which stole personal data and used it to target British social media users with propaganda during the Brexit campaign, and it was also implicated in the US presidential elections as well. The crossovers seem to be almost absolute. Every single shady individual and organisation that's had a hand in one campaign also seems to be linked to the other. There are too many players involved directly in both for it to simply be a coincidence. But Bank has been involved with Russian deals nonetheless. He has found to be paid a bribe to a Russian minister, for example, before securing a diamond mining license, for example. In November last year, the National Crime Agency got involved and was told to investigate Banks' involvement in Brexit. MPs called for a suspension of Article 50 until the investigation had been concluded. Needless to say, that didn't happen. Much as with Trump's presidency, by the time the truth officially comes out, the damage may well and truly be done. Now, the Electoral Commission, who began investigating the criminal activities of the various Leave campaigns, are on record as saying that they do not believe Banks is the source of the donations that he made. Some particularly suspicious actions were that Banks had tried to cover up the source of the large donation to the Leave campaign, which was traced to a non-qualifying company based on the Isle of Man. Now, that revelation alone is enough to claim that Banks broke the law, even without linking it back to Russia. The Isle of Man is outside of the UK, which is why it can exist as a lucrative tax haven. Funds for electoral campaigns are not allowed to be sourced from outside the UK. It'd almost be simpler if there were no further suspicions, if this weren't just the tip of the iceberg. The Electoral Commission already had enough evidence to charge Banks with a criminal offence, and if it went no further, this could already been done and a prosecution surely secured. But because the extent of the criminal activities looked so huge, it had to be passed on to the NCA, who can investigate beyond the confines of simple electoral law. But the problem with huge crimes like this is they take much longer to investigate, particularly if there are international links. And so you don't prosecute until, of course, you've concluded it and passed the case file to the Crown Prosecution Service. But it is suspected that the criminality goes much deeper than just using an offshore money to fund the campaign. So the investigation is continuing. It could be some time before charges are laid, and who knows what the consequences might have been by then. Just look at how long it's taken the US to investigate Trump's activities, and that is a better resourced investigation than this one. Now, people may point to the fact, but in the US, the investigation is surely hampered by the fact that the subject of their investigation is a sitting president with executive power to frustrate them. But the Banks investigation has been largely dismissed by our government as well. Remember, the tendrils of Banks' activities are buried within the ERG, the party within the party of the Conservative government. Now, when the full extent of the facts come to light, Theresa May is going to be asked some very serious questions about why she didn't take the investigation seriously when breaches of electoral law had already been proven. The government, given that it has chosen not to take it seriously and plough on anyway, now has a vested interest in keeping a lid on it. So this is something that you would think in a few years' time is really going to blow up. I don't know where we as a country are going to be in that time. Will damage have already been done or not? If damage has been done but not permanent, would this help heal it when it all comes out? I don't know. What I do know is that these things do take years to come through. We know it's not his money. We know it's come from outside the UK. That is enough to link him to a crime. But it's been described, as I say, as the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to be discovered yet. So there we go. I hope you found that video enlightening. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, click the bell notification as well. Although there'll be another video on later tonight, there will be another poll going out for video choices for tomorrow as well. So click on the channel name and the community tab to have your say on that. Until next time, I'll see you later.